It was a dull cold day in April, and the worker in cubicle 13 struck his face on his clock. William lifted his hand heavily and grabbed the newspapers that had been dumped on his desk from the pneumatic pipes. His job was to sort out back numbers of various newspapers. Any headlines that included certain words were put into one pile. The rest were put into another pile, which would be loaded onto a trolley and wheeled clumsily to a storage room. He cast a glance at his colleague in cubicle 13 while rubbing his eyes and pretending to be sleepy. His neighbour had fallen asleep on his desk and landed on his clock. His slow, raspy breaths convinced William that he was genuinely asleep. He went back to work. The first issue had a big bold headline that included the word war. That went to pile A. The next few didn't have any taboo words. Then one had a column whose title had government. Pile A. The next one said recycled dystopian nightmare scenario. He dragged the newspaper onto the forbidden pile, and underneath it was a word that he'd been watching out for. Coffee was the banned word in this headline. William scanned the room slowly, yawning awkwardly, and pretended to take a nap on his desk. He collapsed onto the newspaper face down and began to read. William had learnt from his meagre career in his ministry, Mini-Decaf, that there were certain things that the state wanted to hide, and coffee was one of them. Before the current government came to reign, people subsisted on a drug called coffee to be productive and alert. He had gleaned from some banned newspapers that the creation of the state, controlled by Big Barista and the ministers of Minikoff, had limited the supply of the dangerous drug to only higher management who were trained on how to use the substance. The population was kept in control by lack of coffee and repetitive, simple jobs. What William didn't understand was why he was not sleepy at all, amidst all his colleagues who frequently fell asleep on the job and could barely sort out their newspapers. He finished skimming through the article. It was about coffee consumption and its effects on the trout population, and pretended to wake up from a deep slumber. He yawned and looked around the room again. Was the lady in cubicle 40 looking at him? He knew her name, Jane. She had mumbled it when they had sat at the same table during lunch. It felt as if she was surveying his movements. She yawned and lifted a newspaper to her face. The headline of her issue read, "They're watching you." William decided that it was nothing and pretended to go to sleep. Somebody prodded William's shoulder. It was the lady who carted away the pile B newspapers. "Sowerby, say, Mr. O'Connor." She yawned, farted, loaded his sorted pile onto her trolley, and ambled away. When he arrived at O'Connor's office, the light was beginning to fade outside in a frappuccino-hued April sunset. He stumbled into the office and nearly tripped over himself. Jane was seated there, and she didn't appear to be drowsy. If anything, she was the most alert-looking person that William had seen, besides upper management staff. O'Connor was behind his desk, a glass of black liquid in one hand and an old paperback book in the other. 1984 read the cover. He wondered what significance that had. He put the book down and grinned at William. "You can stop pretending to be asleep." William froze. He could feel Jane staring at him and O'Connor's grin growing wider at his panic. He stole a glimpse at Jane and saw that she was smiling at him too. William lifted his head. "You knew?" he croaked. He was accustomed to barely using his vocal cords. O'Connor's grin turned into a smirk. "I knew too," said Jane. "Ever since you sat next to me during lunch and your face reddened when I fell asleep on your shoulder." William grimaced. He had let his guard down for 1 second. Just 1 second. "Are there others like us?" O'Connor shook his head. "Most of the others that are awake are thanks to our rations of coffee." He pointed to the black liquid in his hand. "But you two were born different. Special. You two are what the prophecy foretold." "I don't understand." William wondered if he was dreaming. "The prophecy talks of two legendary people who shall rebuild the world from ruin. They were not named, but they were called the Morning People in what remains of the written records. Jane and William, you are the mythical Morning People." O'Connor spread his arms in a dramatic gesture. Jane grasped William's hand. O'Connor walked over to them and put a dry palm on William's shoulder. "I am a member of an underground organization whose goal is to overthrow Big Barista and Minikoff. And we want you, no, we need you to join. Do you have any questions?" William regained his voice and decided to ask the only question that he could think of. "Does Minikoff stand for Ministry of Coffee?" "No, William, it was named after Dmitry Minikoff." He cleared his throat and took a sip of coffee. "Our underground society is named after an ancient relic that we found in the storage rooms of Minitikaf. We call ourselves the Starbucks Membership." Jane stared at O'Connor in wonder as he produced a frayed green card from his desk. "Now, William, will you join us in pursuit of coffee for the masses and an end to Big Barista's tyranny?"